Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original in the order of release. Today we have a Netflix 168th film from 2019. It's the comedy Sextuplets, directed by Michael Tiddes. It stars Marlon Wayans, Bresha Webb, Michael Ian Black, Molly Shannon, and Glynn Turman. I'm Jesse, and I'm here with MJ. How are you?
I'm good. You would have been excused for just naming one person in the cast list this week. I would have allowed that.
It's a very good point. Some very clever trickery done in this film, which I'm sure we'll probably touch on very soon.
I'm sure we will.
I don't know. I feel like that had nothing to lead on from that. You got me.
Sorry, mate.
Oh man, we're recording in the Arvo. Usually we do it a little bit earlier, so brains are probably a little bit more fried than usual.
And if that's not any excuse, I'm sure this conversation will fry our brains even more talking about this movie.
There's a bit of a chance. Well, let's get into the Fast Flicks, where we give our own little summary of what it's all about. So, what's Sextuplets about for you?
Well, Fast Flicks for me is always my elevator pitch. Then someone says to me, "Hey, MJ, what's this movie about?" And I can't talk about this movie without literally calling out the main character or the main actor in the film. So my Fast Flicks is Marlon Wayans plays every character. As a grown man discovers he's separated at birth from five other siblings.
Yeah, it's same for me. A man awaiting the arrival of his own family sets out to find his long lost siblings.
Very nice.
We like to talk about how this arrived on our streaming platform, Netflix. So what can you tell us about this one?
I didn't find too much, unfortunately, but basically a while back we did it would have been a while ago now when we did the podcast on the movie Naked, which was Marlon Wayans starring, Michael Tiddes directing, comedy on Netflix. So basically these guys have got a chance to have another crack with it. Let's make another comedy for Netflix. We talk so often about the comedies being such a great spot for these sort of streaming services, such an easy commitment from an audience member sitting on their couch. And as we sort of seen as well in the last few years, pandemic aside, we've sort of been seeing the decline of comedies in the box office at theatres anyway. So it fits right, makes sense why Netflix got on board from the very start. Marlon Wayans, obviously a very familiar name for people. Everyone kind of knows his stuff to some extent. Wouldn't say he's an A-grader by any means, but you kind of know what you get with him. So the film went into production in sort of September, October, back in 2018 in Atlanta. That's basically all I can give you. And then it released in August 16, 2019. Seems like it was just a very non-event, the production, which is a good story.
Yeah, I've only got a couple of quotes, I guess, from Wayans when they're going around getting this one out to eyeball. So I think he said that he was excited to be in business with Netflix yet again on another project, like you mentioned with Naked that we have covered on this podcast already. He said, "I love how they embrace comedy and diversity. I'm looking forward to doing the thing I love most, which is comedy." And I think that sort of leads on to, as we've sort of touched on, that Marlon Wayans plays these six characters himself. So they used a bit of motion capture technology to put him on the screen all at one time. So from what I could see, Marlon Wayans would get to work at 2 a.m. He'd be in makeup until 9 a.m. and then go to work 12 to 15 hours of shooting. So he was having some absolutely huge days, absolutely crazy. And they'd shoot the one scene for multiple days. And so, 3 days for one character and then sort of move on. So it's almost doing that same scene over and over again, which is crazy. And the quote here from the director was the motion control, basically it was composing a shot. You work it out with the actors so you get it perfect. And then once you do, you record and then you do it again as if there's no one else in the room. And, you had to get the timing right. You had to get the same eye lines, say his lines, the dialogue. It's just crazy the time and effort that would have had to be put in to make this one, I guess.
Yeah, you've got to respect that. And obviously when you're watching it, it's hard not to try and find little bits and pieces because you literally see the same person on screen sometimes 5 or 6 times. And you're just like, this just must have been incredible to film. I remember when we did the movie, what was the Stephen King book?
1922.
Where she was chained to the bed. No, where she was chained to the bed.
Gerald's Game.
Gerald's Game, because obviously the lead actress in that kept having sort of flashbacks and was, oh, hang on, it was the guy who kept appearing in the room and things like that. And they talked, no, it was her, sorry. And they talked about how they had to almost get a secondary actress in to play, so she had someone to look at, which would have been the same in this situation. I suppose the only thing that's positive about it is they could have shot a lot of scenes with a very small amount of cast availability. And I think a lot of the other lead characters that came on board, or lead actors that came on board that weren't played by Marlon Wayans, came on board really late in the piece. Like once they got announced once they'd already started production. So I guess they could have just started shooting all the other scenes and then filled the blanks later on. But it would have been brutal. And yeah, hats off to the effort for everyone involved in this, particularly Marlon Wayans.
Yes. Well, this is the time where I like to look at some translations from around the world. So in Brazil, this was called 6 Times Confusing. So not too bad. In Germany, it was just called One of Six. Doesn't really give much context about anything else. In Japan, it was called, with a question mark at the end, was I a 6th child?
The age-old question.
And then Russia, I don't know where this has come from, but in Russia, it was called Gear Wheels.
Are we sure that's correct? Are we sure that someone hasn't done a misprint in IMDb?
Gear Wheels. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that they arrived with that, but that's pretty classic. What can you tell us about the consensus for this one? What are people saying about it?
Firstly, I will say I quite like the title, Sextuplets. I think it works. I think it tells you what you want to do. It's I'm fine with it. We normally be critical. I'm normally a bit critical on titles because I can be, but Sextuplet gets ticks for me. Consensus isn't great. It's 4.5 out of 10 on IMDb off just over 8,000 ratings, which not a bad result, to be frank. I mean, this is the kind of movie that is going to get a lot of you're either going to really like it, and this movie is either for you or you hate it. And that's kind of the way to look at it. And those scores reflect that. And I think Letterboxd is 1.8 out of 5, which is very, very low. Just over 4,000 ratings. And I actually had a look. The most common rating that it got on Letterboxd was 0.5 stars. That was what the most people gave it. And don't get me wrong, there was about 100 people or so, a couple of hundred people that gave it 5 stars, which is people having a bit of fun as well with it. But it didn't do very well. It's probably the best way to sum it up.
Yep, Rotten Tomatoes saying the same thing. The critics only 15 reviews, but sits at 20%, and the audience is on 35%, and that's on a bit over 50. So again, very negative from all around, realistically.
So that means there were 3 or 4 critics who liked it, and that surprises me in itself.
It's true. It's a good pickup, isn't it? If it's not sitting on 0, then there's got to be some positivity in there somewhere.
Good on them.
What are your early thoughts on this one?
Oh man, I really wanted to like it. I mean, I read the synopsis and I thought this, obviously knowing what it is, I read the synopsis. I'm like, this is going to work. This is a fun plot, a fun idea. I like Marlon Wayans as much as the next person. I think I was probably the only one on the pod that liked Naked without loving it, but a big scary movie fan. I think he's a funny guy. But yeah, as sort of time kept elapsing in the film, I just wasn't into it, and I really tried to. But I mean, this movie was pretty bad.
Yeah, I've had a few rough weeks, and I thought I was going to hate this, but I actually thoroughly enjoyed it, and I had so many laughs that I struggled to cut out scenes that I really liked in this. I'm on board.
I'm really glad. I'm really glad. I have to say, I didn't know that he played all the characters. So actually, before we go any further, we're going to spoil the film throughout this conversation. So if you do want to watch it, that this is probably one of the few films that a spoiler wouldn't like. If you hear some spoilers, it's probably not going to ruin your experience too much. But either way, if you do want to watch it, you don't want spoilers, then turn off now and come back later on. But when we first meet Russell, I was like, do I know this guy? And I'm looking at him. I'm like, God, he's familiar. And then I'm like, is it a guy wearing a fat suit or is it just a fat guy? And then it kind of clicked with me. I'm like, actually, it's actually him. And then all of the gags about, oh, we look the same and stuff. Like, but I didn't know going
I
into
didn't
it,
either.
and then you knew it was happening. So
yeah, I'm the same. It took me a little bit into Russell going, this is looking like him, and then obviously as the other, you introduce the others, you're like, oh, he's doing them all. So
yeah, then
good
it's
effort.
fun. Yeah,
yeah, good. Well, talk about some characters in this one. Obviously, probably hitting off there with Alan, maybe to start off with.
yeah. I mean, like, there's not a lot of character depth in this film. Alan to me was fine. He kind of, for this movie to work, he needs to be as normal as possible so that the others kind of stand out around him. And he was normal. He was likable. He kind of had himself together, but he also, wanted a family. So there was always that level of, I might put myself through a little bit more than the average person would, and it kind of worked. But I mean, he's certainly not a standout character that you need to dissect too much, I don't think.
I think you've said that perfectly, in that for the other 5 characters and their wacky and craziness to work, you needed him to be that sort of down to earth character. And I think that they did that well through that idea of, being a soon to be father, and the struggles with his own identity because he didn't know his own family. And, they keep harking on about he doesn't want the same thing for his own kids, but he's putting himself at risk of being that because he's not devoting enough time to his wife and his soon to be child, but more tracing the roots of his own family. And I think that they did a good job in setting that up, in having his wife as the complete opposite, being, coming from a good family. The dad's the judge, being this fatherly figure that, doesn't approve of his daughter's partner, and, doesn't want to have to owe this guy anything. So I think the setup with him was quite okay.
And also the fact that the setup for him, and I guess the plot, wasn't it wasn't too difficult. They didn't bother wasting time on it. They're basically like, we're having a kid, wish I knew my medical history, I can find it out, and I'm going to go. And I was like, cool, I don't need you to screw around with why we got to do this. I know what this film is. Let's just go with it. And they didn't mess around at all. They just went into it. And I like that too.
Yes, it could have really brought the start down if you had half an hour of all this background that you didn't need. So yeah. Good point. All right, who have you got next?
I've got Russell next. And for me, Russell was too dislikable at the start. And I actually found that he got funnier for me when he became a bit nicer. Because I could laugh at him a little bit more rather than being like, you're an asshole, stop being an asshole. And I'm not going to dissect more. Obviously, they don't bother going into why Russell's, basically agoraphobic and still just watches TV and eats cereal all day. But I mean, I got to a point where I thought Russell was pretty funny because at the start I'm like, I don't know, I don't want this to be like a buddy road trip thing because I'm not buying this guy too much. But he was all right by the end.
I think to start off with, I was a bit confused as to what was going on, but I started off, and I think that they needed him to be this stereotype. You needed the idea of obesity, and you needed that idea of loving TV and cereal, because that leads to a lot of those jokes throughout, which we probably see in a lot of Wayans comedy, where you've got that comedic element that they keep repeating. So I think with that character, they needed those in there, and the idea of not knowing how to drive as well. These traits that they give him all work pretty well. And then they needed that at the start with him to set them up to make them funny later on, I guess. So, yeah. Did you want to talk about any of the other siblings?
I want to talk about Dawn, because Dawn was my favorite. I actually thought he got this one pretty right. I think just like she was obviously massively over the top, but I just really bought into that energy, and you just get the feeling that he had a lot of fun playing her, and I think that comes off really well. So yeah, Dawn gets a big tick for me.
Yeah, I think the idea of her being an exotic or a former exotic dancer just added to the ability for him to do a lot of physical humor with her as well. And especially having her in a prison situation too, it leads that way. Like, they're good little setups for these characters. By having, if you just had her as like a stay-at-home mum, a lot of that physical comedy is not going to work with her. So they made these smart choices along the way, I think.
Yeah, and her ability to just explode at nothing was really fun.
Yeah, good. Any others?
Look, I could say a line on all of them, but actually the one that I can't really is Ethan. I can't really put my finger on him too much. Mind you, the character itself reminded me a little bit of Shorty from from Scary Movie, obviously to look at initially because it's obviously a Marlon Wayans character. But yeah, I think I got not much more to say about him. He was fine. He obviously was meant to be the villain at some point, and then he turned really quickly. And I guess that's that whole idea of family being there for you no matter what, as long as the support's there. But yeah, that's all I've got with Ethan.
Yeah, that was a bit of a throw to. Sorry, you were talking more about Jasper, weren't you?
No, Ethan, the criminal-y type guy. Oh, sorry, they're both criminals. Like,
yeah, that's what
I mean.
Yeah, because I was like, Ethan was
the one that stole his identity.
Impersonates him. Yeah. So yeah, Ethan. Yeah. Like, I thought that it was nice to see he had a little bit of heart towards the end, and happy to take the fall for Alan, so he could be at the birth of his child, I guess. Yeah, when you were talking, I was like, oh, this could almost be Jasper as well, because
yeah, I didn't realize that.
The villain guy as well, who just sort of is added it at the end for nothing.
Jasper for me is when it just went too far. Like, he's just like this worldwide criminal who's got like red hair and buck teeth. It's like, how can we make this as ridiculous as possible? And they just went there. That's all you can really say about it.
I'm probably just going to put in here too. Alan's boss, I think it was Marie.
Linda. I think Marie was his wife.
Marie was the wife. Linda. Woeful, not funny. The boss, she was just. I just hated those two scenes with her. Thought they were woeful.
I'll agree with that one.
Good. All right. The director, Michael Tiddes. Anything that you wanted to include about him?
Well, I think this is like his fifth movie with Marlon Wayans. Obviously, they did Naked together, Haunted House 1 and 2, because they've got a sequel. 50 Shades of Black. So he's obviously very much tied to the Marlon Wayans humor, and they're obviously happy to work together and keep making these kinds of movies.
Yep. Not much else to add. I think we probably said exactly the same thing when we did Naked a couple of years ago. Not much more to add.
I should have checked in my notes for that.
All right, let's talk about some scenes. What did you enjoy in this?
I feel like I didn't really laugh that much in this film, so I'm really looking forward to you talking about your scenes, because I think I will laugh, retrospectively. The only scene that I've actually got here at all, which is a scene that I did laugh in quite a lot, was just after when they're at the service station and Dawn's like beating up those blokes, and she just sort of yells out that she's riding shotgun. And I like kind of Russell's response, sort of under his breath, like, "You're a bully, Dawn." And then she retorts with, "You smell like belly button." And I know this was the humor throughout the whole film, but for some reason those two lines really got me. Even like the way he delivered, "You're a bully, Dawn," was just like it was so Russell, I guess. Yeah, that was funny. It was a really funny scene.
Good. Is that it?
That was it, and it wasn't that I hated the film. It's just there was nothing where I was sitting there like, that's the one. I gotta put that one down.
All right, I'll see if we can get some that might get a giggle. So I thought.
I'll laugh. I'll laugh with you. That's
good,
for sure.
Good. I'm glad. I thought it started off well when Alan and his wife, they rock up at her dad's place for the barbecue, and he makes this joke about family being it's like a Tyler Perry movie, which I was just like, oh, I mean, that was a really clever joke. And then it wasn't even a laugh out loud one. But then the idea of the dad on the barbecue, like tossing that meat while he's having that conversation, just creating that fear in him of how he feels with the dad. I thought that was really well done. Russell's first shot, like when he's behind that door and he's like saying, "I'm waiting for the Mork and Mindy VHS." I thought that was funny, and then using his whistle for the stranger danger, and I was just like, oh, who actually has one of these? And then like when he walks inside, and this just related with me because of all the amount of rubbish that I've collected over the years. But he talks about don't touch my TV guides because they could be worth millions. I was just like, maybe I just related.
I did ask you. Maybe you did. I think you're a very different person to what Russell is. But I got to ask you, had you had any beers prior to watching this movie? I know you don't mind a beer at night time. No alcohol involved at all. Cool. This would be a fun film to watch with people and beers. I'll give you that. So I just wanted to check and preface, but that's good to know.
Yeah. No. When Alan and Russell are at the hotel and they start having that pillow fight, and then Russell just smacks him so hard that he goes into the wall. I had a good laugh out loud at that one as well.
On another day, I can hear you putting that in your bad
Yeah, I know.
thing. So I'm
I
glad
know.
that I'm glad that you're in a good mood for this one.
Maybe last week's episode's just I was just like in need of something completely different. But
That's
yeah,
fair. Yeah.
there's a whole bunch in this that probably usually I'd be like, that was the worst scene in the world. But I laughed. I think
Great. I'm glad. That's movies, right? It's all about
yeah.
the context of how you watch them.
And this is me, like I've cut down his list just, and I've still got a couple more.
Great.
When Russell and Alan are in the car and they're singing that Different Strokes theme song, and Russell's like, "Oh, puts me to sleep," and the next shot, his head's like hanging out the window while he's asleep. Made me laugh. There's lots of things that make me laugh.
You liked Russell.
Yeah, I did. You mentioned the scene where Dawn was losing it. That those guys in the car park. Just when she started doing the werewolf stuff. I don't know. I thought that was funny.
I did like that scene. That was a good scene.
That was a good scene. Ethan, when he pretends to be Alan with his wife, and she's talking about, we've got a breastfeeding class, and he's like, I'm going to get an A in this subject, and then they get there, and he's like, sitting there in this class with these people, and he's like, let's get to the titties, get the suckers out, and then he starts taking his phone out, and they're like, no photos. I just thought that was hilarious as well.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
And when they go and see baby Pete, sort of like this little shriveled up dude in the hospital bed, and then Dawn says, "Oh, we could put his dead body on a keychain." Just like a vivid. I was like, "Oh, that was so funny." And last one, Jasper. We spoke about Jasper before, but goes on about this rant about not fitting in as a kid, and he was like little orphan Annie with his red hair, and then he just finishes with the line, "I admit it was a hard knock life," and I was just like, you got me. That was good. I like Annie. It was a good. Anyway, yeah, that's me done.
Fair enough.
No, there's a fair bit in this I giggled at. So yeah,
I'm glad.
What are some things you didn't like in it?
Yeah, again, but not much. But I think you kind of touched on this before. That scene with Ethan and Linda when he's at the office, and just everything about that scene was purely awful. Like that was when I'm like, this movie is terrible. And that's when every now and then you see how Netflix gives the director kind of full ownership of a film, and it's the scenes like that you're like, someone would have pulled that up at some point and been like, this movie, this scene sucks. So that scene sucked. It just got nothing else for it. And the other one I didn't really like was when they started singing the Rockford Files theme song, and they all had that big sing along. That went just too far, that joke.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think if you're not fans of those TV shows, a few of those jokes and songs don't really mean much.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and I guess the whole circumstances of what they were doing and where they were just didn't fit for me. But yeah,
yeah, good. Yeah, like I mentioned before, all those scenes with Linda, I think there were only two anyway, but they were just rubbish. The only other thing that I didn't really like in this was the bull scene. They just wake up in the middle of the paddock and Russell's tried to milk this bull for his cereal, and then there's this huge CGI bull that looks absolutely ridiculous. I thought, it's cool they've got a red car, so the bull's going after it and stuff. And I didn't mind it was like that slow-mo shot of the cereal going everywhere and Russell trying to eat the cereal and everything else. But I just didn't really like that scene. So that's
I had to mute that scene because my dog was going nuts at the bull. And didn't really help that I muted it. But either way, I didn't think I was missing much in terms of audio.
No, I don't. A few screams. That's about it. What are some themes or some ideas in this one? I know that's probably not what this film's all about, but what did you pick up?
No, exactly. But it still is based around this whole big, strong theme about family and the bond and the inclusion and that belonging that you feel, and the whole idea of, no matter what, I'm here for you, family mindset that you can have. And that was captured really nicely. I think it's still a responsible film in that sense, despite how, over the top and ridiculous it is in so many ways. They're still trying to highlight the importance of something like family.
Exactly. That idea that they talk about as well, that you can't choose family, but they're still your family. And sometimes families do a lot of taking, whether that's emotionally or financially or time wise,
or kidney wise.
And it's hard to see the positives, but I like that scene at the end where you've got them all together, so that was good. And the only other thing, the foster care system too, and how it's let so many of these kids down too, that fear of rejection and people possibly not wanting to meet you, and the hardships of single mums, and they're just that nice idea that they do have each other, they just didn't know it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, I'm sure you were probably the same, but you assume the whole time the mum was still alive. Like, obviously, Russell was a bit shifty about the whole thing, but also it didn't add up to me that this guy was able to live on his own in any capacity without the support of his own mother. So I knew she was still around, and it was nice to see her, being such a loving, caring mum and understanding why she had to do what she did at the time. I think that was an important part of the film too.
Yeah, well put. What did you take away from this one?
Look, I think nothing much, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it's hard not to think of like the Nutty Professor, right, in this kind of thing. And I know the Nutty Professor is a little bit different in the fact that a lot of the characters that Eddie Murphy plays in that film, when he plays multiple ones, they're in like one scene together at the dinner table. And mind you, those scenes are like Hall of Fame comedy scenes, to be perfectly honest. But when you're comparing it to like the Nutty Professor, like this just didn't work in the same way that did. And I guess there's just a lot more to that film. There's a lot that happens with identity and his own feeling of self-worth and confidence and that kind of stuff. Anyway, but yeah, it's just like a real poor man's Nutty Professor, to be perfectly honest.
You haven't left me with much because my one line I had was, "It's hard to not think of Eddie Murphy, the Nutty Professor." and I didn't, like we mentioned before, it didn't click until a little bit into the film that this was the same person playing all the characters. But as soon as that happened, I was like, oh yeah. I looked, I'm like, oh, where can I watch Nutty Professor? Is it on, what streaming service is it on? Because that's what it brings up in your mind straight away.
That scene of them at the dinner table, it's one thing. If I put that on at home with my whole family at any time, the whole family is just in stitches watching them, like all farting, and the mum with the little guy just farting as well. Hercules. Like that scene is just an absolute classic scene.
Yes, yeah. All right. Did you go on to IMDb to check anyone out?
At one point, I checked out to see if any of Marlon Wayans' brothers helped out for sort of body doubles or being like the other Alan in the scene, and they weren't. But I thought that would make sense. They obviously do a lot of work together. They're probably similar body types and things like that, but no, they didn't.
Cool. I didn't jump on. So that leads us to questions. Any questions that you wanted to ask?
Well, this question's probably not as exciting as I thought it would be because you did kind of quite like the film. But my question was this better than The Ridiculous Six? Because very similar in a lot of ways from a plot perspective, particularly with the fact that there were six of them in both situations, but just kind of like a weird, wacky comedy that I would say didn't really work. Which was better?
It's a good question. And I didn't even think about that. And that almost ties in my one question I had too with, are the stereotypes offensive? Because that was the big issue with Ridiculous Six as well, was that we've got this journey of these characters and you've got a lot of stereotypes that were quite offensive in that. And the same with this, I guess it's a tricky one. I don't know if I want to give away whether I like this more or not, because I want to hold off until my closing thoughts.
That's fine as well.
I did enjoy this, yeah.
Does these films work? They don't work if they're not outlandish stereotypes. So that's the thing. Like if you're trying to make a movie like this, you're not going to, have really big definable stereotypes in your characters, and they're just characters that you have to work really hard to bring something out of them. And the audience isn't sitting there to watch that. They just want to see, okay, here's this woman who's clearly in jail, who's clearly a big personality, who clearly doesn't mind getting in fights. That's all I need to know about her, kind of thing, for her to be funny. So it's a hard one. I don't think these stereotypes are that offensive either. So
I don't, but I don't know whether that's because we're white males that these are all black stereotypes.
True.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Whereas, yeah, I think that from memory with The Ridiculous Six, a few of those stereotypes they came across as a little bit on the nose.
Yeah, racially as well.
Yeah. So that's a good question. Good combination together. I like it. All right, well, let's finish it off then and actually reveal what our thoughts are on this. What are your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, for me, it never really got going, unfortunately. And like I said, maybe that's my own fault because I kind of wanted and I expected a little bit more. I toyed with giving this a high 1.5 stars or a low 2, and I have ended up going with the benefit of the doubt and giving it a low 2. Because weirdly, if I watched it again, I actually feel like I might laugh a little bit more than I initially did the first time. But then again, I'll probably never find that out because I don't think I'm going to rush to watch it again. But again, I'd watch it with people. Like it would be fun to potentially fun to watch with people. But man, there'd be so many other movies I'd choose before it. So it's 2 stars for me.
Waiting for that wind up where you're like, but I don't think I'm ever going to watch it again. I mean, it's not the best comedy in the world or anything like that, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Found enough to laugh about it, and I like the family message that comes through as well. So I'm giving it a 3 out of 5.
Good boy.
Gives it 2.5. We are on socials. We've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram. Question up there was that I want to ask this week is, do you know any sextuplets? I was thinking, I don't even think I know any triplets, let alone sextuplets.
I know a few triplets, but if you do sextuplets, it's got to be like, that's newsworthy whenever they're born, right? That's how big a deal it is.
Yeah, you'd think, yeah, well, definitely. I was like, I don't even think I can think of more than triplets, like 4, 5.
Yeah, what if 5? Obviously, 4 is obviously called like quads, and 5 would be pentuplets, I guess.
That's why I didn't say what they were, and I said the numbers because I got.
Yeah, I don't know of any more than triplets. I had a few triplets at school. I had identical triplets at school. There were 3 girls, and genuinely all looked the same. I couldn't tell you who was who.
Oh man, well, we are back again next week. This is the last time we'll hear us before Christmas. So I hope you have a great Christmas if you're listening to us in 2021. But we'll be back next year, just before the new year, for one last one of 2021, where we're looking at the rom-com from 2019 called Falling in Love. And we're talking about the inn as in like a place to stay. It's directed by Roger Cumble, and it stars Christina Milian, Adam Demos, and Jeffrey Bauer Chapman. So that's what we've got, a rom-com for next week.
I think I remember when this one came out. The title is very familiar.
Yeah. So we'll see. I might continue my streak of feeling happy after this one.
I'd like that.
Nothing like a nice little story. So hopefully it's a good one. But as usual, thanks for the chat. And I'm glad that we could have a chat and talk about this because I did enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we could too. The comedies are the fun ones to talk about, right? Even if we don't like them, they're still fun to talk about.
Yeah, and I like it. This was better than Naked, and I know that you like Naked, but I don't know why I like this one.
And look, don't get me wrong, I didn't love Naked. I think I gave it a 2 or a 2.5, but I think I liked it more than you and Heater did when we did the pod.
Good. All right, I will see you next week.
You certainly will. See you then.